Hi, I'm Fire, here again at the end of the year, continuing a now annual tradition of, at the end of the year, looking back at all of the games I played and talking about how I felt about them, what I think, what I liked, and what I disliked. So at the end of this year, 2022, I've played more games than ever before, and I am excited as always to talk about them with you. So let's get into it. The very first game I played in 2022, I actually started in December 2021. Oops. But that's because it's a fantasy RPG so large and so expansive that it took me the whole of my winter break to beat it. And that game is the one, the only, it's Oblivion. So I've always been a big fan of Skyrim, but like a lot of new age fans of Elder Scrolls, the idea of going back to the older ones intimidated me, especially because the last one came out in Ye Ancient Times 2006 and looks a little bit like ass. But after getting a hearty recommendation from my old college friend Jack, I gave it a whirl, and I'm sincerely glad I did. What Oblivion lacks in visuals, it more than makes up for with phenomenal narrative and dialogue. Its mainline and faction quests are exciting and bombastic, with some truly memorable characters and some jaw-dropping moments. Even the smallest, most inconsequential quests get that same love and care in their design, with each one containing either a clever twist, intriguing exploration of the world's magic and god system, or just generally funny moments. The game isn't without its flaws, and I ran into a lot of little frustrations with confusing dungeon designs, slow NPCs, and lockpicking issues. Lots of lockpicking issues. Plus, the combat was fun at times, but other times just sort of made things, anticlimactic. Still, it was such a unique and well-crafted experience overall that I can tell the development team put a lot of heart into making it. More so even than its successor, honestly.
I'm quite capable of besmirching my good name on my own.
If you're at all a fan of RPGs or Skyrim, I really recommend you check it out, if you haven't yet. By the time I finished Oblivion, it was early January, and I was left with another bountiful harvest of cheap indie games I picked up at the Stainwetter sale. So I started the latest installment of a series that I had been waiting years for, Impostor Factory. Impostor Factory is the newest game in the To the Moon franchise, a series about a team of scientists using technology that edits the memories of the elderly to make them believe they lived a perfect life. However, going into Freebird Games' latest title, I was honestly a little worried. The series originally exploded in popularity for its stellar writing, but the last two games, A Bird Story and Finding Paradise, had pretty weak narratives in my opinion. If this next entry was more of the same, I would have considered dropping the series. Thankfully, Impostor Factory was good. Right away the game pulled me in with some light horror and stellar intrigue, before launching straight away in what the series had always done best, exploring the lives of its characters, their loves, their struggles, and their heartbreak. The final story it told was really quite touching and heartwarming, and was a really nice entry into the series, even without much presence from its main characters. After playing it, I'm excited to see what Kan Gao and his team at Freebird Games cook up next. Though I had many games in mind to play next, at this point I received a notification from Xbox Game Pass that Control, one of the many titles on my literally endless backlog, was soon being taken off the service. So like any rational person, I dropped everything to play it. And it was okay.
And it was a fucking boring game. But you couldn't stop playing.
So Control is a supernatural third-person shooter by Remedy Entertainment. In it, you play as a woman named Jessie and explore a distorted office space while hunting down the paranatural creatures and objects within. It's a really cool concept, and when backed up by dynamic gameplay like it is, it should have been a phenomenal experience. But it just wasn't. Everything interesting or cool about Control is bogged down by repetition, storytelling that spoils potential reveals for you before you get to them, and dry characters. Even if exploring the shifting maze of the oldest house and fighting the strange and creepy hiss were cool at first, after a few hours I just got sick of running through the same drab office spaces, fighting the same basic enemies over and over and over. In fact, by like 10 hours in, I had to turn on invincibility and one-hit kills just to make the encounters go fast enough for me to get to the parts of the game I actually cared about, like tracking down altered items. Overall, Control is a really fascinating and well-directed game, but one marred by missed potential. I genuinely think if they shaved off half the game's chapters, simplified the maps, and put more effort into character writing, it would have been an amazing game. But as it is, every single part of it plays second fiddle to elements of another game in its genre. Except for everything with Dr. Darling, he was perfect. It was at this point I received yet another notification that a game I was interested in was being taken off Game Pass, Bitloom's PHOGS. So yet again, I dropped everything I was doing and got right on it. For those who don't know, PHOGS is a 3D multiplayer puzzle platformer where you and a friend take control of opposite heads of a single fog and try to solve puzzles in a rainbow-colored gumdrop world. The game was a little sickly sweet for me and my boyfriend's tastes, and the puzzles were all pretty basic. But there were some really cute scenes and quests in the game. Plus there were hats, which automatically make this game an 11 out of 10. Unfortunately, we only got about a third of the way through PHOGS before it got taken off Game Pass. But I had a pretty good time with it while it was around. Just as long as I was playing in short bursts. Very short bursts. With so many games in my backlog getting taken off Game Pass, I decided it was time to tackle a game that I had been sitting on a little too long. The ever-iconic action beat-em-up, Yakuza 5. I actually started Yakuza 5 back in July of 2021 after chasing the high from finishing 4, but all my excitement soon petered out when I ran into the game's slow pacing, boring primary conflict, and lonely, depressed version of Kiryu. Even after the game started branching out to other characters like Saejima and even Shinada, I was just struck again by how bland so much of it was. The game did eventually pick up in the final part and had a great twist villain. Not to mention, I absolutely adored all of Haruka's idol sequences, maybe even more than the Hostess Club minigames from earlier titles. But every high in Yakuza 5 is matched with such low lows that it's hard for me to say it was a super positive experience. Like every Yakuza game, there's some truly great moments in here, but out of all 6 Ryu ga Gotoku games I have played to this point, it's definitely the weakest by far. After finally finishing my year-long venture to complete Yakuza 5, I was ready to take a break from big titles and the quick turnover of Game Pass games with something a little shorter and simpler. Thankfully, Us 2's Assemble with Care delivered just that. In this cute little puzzle game, you play as Maria, an antique restorer tasked with fixing the broken treasures and fractured relationships of people she meets during her travels. Though the game begins with a lot of quick fixes, you soon find yourself tackling bigger and bigger projects and even completing a few tasks beyond repairing as well. The core concept of this game is great, with really tight pacing, great sound design, and some beautiful little moments and stories captured here. After playing, I even felt like I became a little handier myself. Though I did struggle with the controls a bit at first, it's a really sweet little game that's worth a play if you like cozy games. Invigorated by Assemble with Care's quick completion after months of grinding the same game, I started devouring games like it was nobody's business. And one of those bite-sized titles I took on during this period was Bandai Namco's Taiko no Tatsujin. Funny enough, my first introduction to Taiko was actually through the Yakuza series, as well as those videos that occasionally trend on social media of Japanese drummers just going absolutely apeshit on the game. But as a longtime fan of its sister title, Osu, I've always wanted to give the full game a real shot. And I did, and surprise, surprise, I loved it. Taiko no Tatsujin is a fun and casual rhythm game that lets you focus on just hitting the beats and jamming out. Though of course playing on Xbox just made me spend the entire time wishing I was using a drum kit, I had a good time tapping along to their songs and just chilling. The limited music collection definitely puts it as a second to Osu and other online community-driven rhythm games, but the visual customization was a nice touch, and it's definitely another rhythm game that will live close to my heart. After finishing the bulk of Taiko no Tatsujin, I was just approaching spring break. As one would expect, I had a lot of travel plans, but not a lot of things to play on the go. Thankfully, HAL Laboratory had my back, and released Kirby and the Forgotten Land the very day my vacation started. And while I'd already played quite a few Kirby titles and my fair share of adventure platformer games, I am so happy I picked up this new one. Taking Kirby into the third dimension was such a fresh move for the series. Plus, the introduction of upgrades and Waddle Dee Town made it feel like I was always working towards something new. The introduction of side quests and mouthful mode also kept me on my toes and preserved that sense of wonder that tends to get lost in series titles like Kirby. Besides that, the game had beautiful environmental design and incredibly snappy gameplay that was just mwah, chef's kiss. The entire game was phenomenal, but the ending sequence especially blew me out of the water. Everything from the upgraded boss fights to the insane final reveals really just put the cherry on top of an already phenomenal cake. Easily one of the best Kirby games ever made, and the best AAA title I played this year, Kirby and the Forgotten Land was such a phenomenal experience, and a must-play whether you're a Kirby fan or not. After beating Kirby on the road, I came back home from my spring vacation just in time for Life is Strange True Colors to come to Xbox Game Pass. Much like Kirby, I was already a longtime fan of Deck 9 and the Life is Strange series, so I knew I was going to enjoy myself no matter what the game had in store. But wow, I forgot just how hard this series goes. Life is Strange True Colors is about a girl named Alex Chen, who moves to a quaint mountain town with her brother Gabe after escaping a tumultuous upbringing. However, when their quiet community turns out to have a dark underbelly, she must use her budding powers to unravel the truth, no matter how much it hurts. True Colors is the Life is Strange team at their best, with charming environmental design, casual but compelling gameplay, and excellent music. But as usual, the game truly shines brightest with its character writing. Every single character in True Colors is grounded and believable, with realistic emotional journeys and personal narratives that make the entire town and their relationships to one another feel natural and real. Their banter with one another and newcomer Alex is quippy and fun, and makes even the smallest interactions a joy to listen into.
Perfect.
That guy's bad to the gnome.
Right? I heard he won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Oh god, please stop.
Alex's ability takes the surface-level characterization a step further, as her powers allow her to experience the world as others see it, and we as players get an even more psychological, personal look at who these people really are. All of this sets the stage for a deeply compelling mystery, and as Alex and the audience come to intimately know these characters and want what's best for them, it's hard to accept just how many of them are content with burying the town's dark secrets. I could truly go on and on, but suffice to say that Life is Strange True Colors is a fantastically written game that touched me deeply, and I'll be thinking about both the story I told and the connections I formed in Haven Springs well throughout the coming months. The next game I played is one that I'd been sitting on for a few months, but was pretty excited to dive into. Far Cry 6. Now, let me be clear, there is one reason and one reason only that I wanted to play Far Cry 6. The main character is a Latinx woman named Danny. I am a Latinx woman named Danny. This is why representation matters, you corporate fucks. If I see myself in your game, I'm going to play the game, no matter how bad it is. And boy, was it a little bit bad. Far Cry 6 is a first-person shooter where you play as Guerrilla Danny Rojas as she works to overthrow the fascist regime of the island nation of Yara. In theory, running around killing fascists, listening to Spanish music, and setting things on fire sounds kinda fun. But the reality of Far Cry 6 is that you just spend 60 hours running around boring, empty jungles, doing boring side quests until an NPC of interest either tells you to kill someone or dies in front of you. There's fun to be had in Far Cry for sure, like helping fucking Danny Trejo cook tacos, or this neat little crossover they did with Stranger Things for some reason. But the fun stuff is so few and far between a boring world and a half-assed revolution narrative that it's easy to lose heart. Ubisoft, please stop making long and empty open world games, I'm begging you. Just make more things like Blood Dragon. If you do, I promise people will respect you again. The total opposite of Ubisoft's hollow open world, Modern Storyteller's The Forgotten City presented one of the most complex, well-crafted environments and stories I've seen in a long time. The Forgotten City is a narrative-driven adventure game in a city which follows only one law, the Golden Rule, which states that every single person will be executed if anyone commits even a single crime. With knowledge from the future and the power to loop through time, your task is to discover who breaks the Golden Rule and how to stop them. But even with the power of time and save scumming on your side, the true magic of this game is how much complexity it shoves into such a small environment. The city itself is relatively small, with only 20 or so denizens and taking only about a minute to run from one end to the other. But within that small scope, the developers managed to squeeze an incredible amount of overlapping mysteries, challenges, and goals. The story is driven by your interactions with a diverse cast of characters, and the knowledge you gain from them and carry over between time loops. Information which leads to your downfall in one iteration can save a life in the next one, or nab you a useful item. Add to that some suspenseful combat sections and some truly chilling reveals, and you have the recipe for a fantastic and deeply compelling game. I truly can't even begin to describe how smart this game is, and how great it feels to overcome its challenges. If you are at all able, I highly recommend playing. From one iconic city to another, the next game I played was Criterion Software's Burnout Paradise Remastered, an open-world racing game where you compete in events such as races, takedown showdowns, and stunt runs to level up your license and become a true Paradise City master. My stepdad actually owned this game when I was a kid, and I had a lot of fond memories of driving around the city, finding shortcuts, destroying billboards, and running other cars off the road. So when I saw it on Xbox Game Pass, I immediately downloaded it to relive the glory days. Upon returning, driving around the city and fucking about definitely still holds up. Plus, the soundtrack to this game has some absolute fucking bangers from the early 2000s. The story and progression missions aren't super impressive, honestly, but it's a good game just to kick back and chill on, and I'm happy I went back to it. Still making my way through Game Pass titles, the next game I tackled was Bugsnax, an adventure exploration game by Young Horses. In it, you play as a reporter who travels to Snacktooth Island, the home of Bugsnax, to investigate what exactly they are, what the island's residents know, and what happened to the missing expedition leader who was researching them. Along the way, you research, capture, and eat the various species of Bugsnax, all while completing quests and unraveling the many mysteries of the island. What initially presents itself as a lighthearted experience can get surprisingly emotional and intense at times, especially as you begin hunting down some of the rare snacks and unraveling the villagers' secrets. Still, it's generally a pretty fun and easygoing game, with lots of great voice acting, gameplay, and quest design to smooth over what could have easily been a very grindy experience. I had a great time with it, and I'm excited to see what the developers whip up next. The next few games are going to go pretty quick, so get ready. In a similar vein to Bugsnax, Pupperazzi is another collection-based adventure exploration game by Sundaymouth. In it, you play as a photographer tasked with taking snapshots of cute dogs. As you explore the game's 5 levels and meet its furry inhabitants, you fulfill photography requests and upgrade your camera to take more and better photos of all the game's pups. It's a very chill and short game with lots of charm that I'd love to see expanded in the future. Next, I tried out Superhot Mind Control Delete, a game which is nearly identical to the original Superhot by the Superhot team. Fucking, how many times do you think I could say Superhot in the same sentence? Anyway, Superhot is a series where you fight your way through waves of enemies in bullet time and generally harness your inner badass. The Mind Control Delete part of the title adds a roguelike element to the game, with procedurally generated maps and enemies, as well as new powers and upgrades that make every run feel unique. I only made my way to floor 4 before it sadly got taken off Game Pass, but if you like the original Superhot, Mind Control Delete is like the dictionary definition of more of the same. So you'll surely get a kick, or punch, out of it. As we approached Game Showcase season, I got to try out a handful of game demos, including the next 2 games on this list. First, I tried Metal Hellsinger, a hybrid first-person shooter and rhythm game where you score points and bonus damage for killing enemies on beat. It basically plays exactly like Doom, including getting bonuses for glory kills and general aggression, but set to an insanely dope soundtrack. Plus, much like Burnout Paradise, Metal Hellsinger invested a ton of money into getting the rights to iconic songs from famous metal artists in their OST. So instead of jamming along to generic action music, you're headbanging to artists like my boy Surge from System of a Down. Unfortunately, despite the appeal of the demo, I found the finished story to be kinda short and repetitive. The whole thing only took me about 2.5 hours to beat, and every boss fight is the same boss over and over, and over, and over. Overall, it's a great concept and a passionate love letter from the developers The Outsiders to both metal and action games. But as it stands, you really have to be buying it just for the gameplay, because everything else is pretty basic. Another Steam Next Fest demo game, Potion Permit, is a life sim / RPG by Massive Hive Media. In it, you play as a state alchemist, chemist, tasked with helping people of the town of Moonberry cure what ails them. There, you'll diagnose their symptoms, gather herbs, brew potions, and treat them in your clinic. All the while, you'll be making friends, completing quests, and healing the environment with your knowledge of chemistry. One thing I found really unique about Potion Permit is how the game begins, as you enter town not as a beloved new neighbor, but as a shunned and reviled outsider. Since the town of Moonberry has a bad history with state chemists, you have to earn their trust and friendship through your actions, and a lot of hard work. But it's all worth it as you get to build up relationships and improve the town as you pursue your ideal rural lifestyle. My only problem with the game is the drop-off, and after a strong opening, it turns rather grindy and bland pretty quickly. It's a good time for about the length of the demo, which is generously around 6 hours long, but it's not really worth it after that. Jumping back into bigger titles, I next played Alice Madness Returns, a sequel to the 2000s American McGee's Alice by Spicy Horse. In Madness Returns, you play as a psychologically damaged Alice Liddell, who is forced to return to Wonderland as a terrible train rips through the countryside. The train, like Wonderland, is driven by some unresolved trauma from Alice's childhood, which is up to you to uncover. The game takes place in a dark and twisted version of the well-beloved Wonderland, and as Alice, you must fight your way through its corrupted denizens to unlock the truth. Along the way, you gather collectibles, a lot of collectibles, solve puzzles, and slowly unravel what happened the night the Liddell family perished. Although a bit tedious, especially with all those aforementioned collectibles, it's still a solid game with some beautiful environments and interesting level design, even if it is very 2010s Hot Topic. After Alice, I took on AI the Somnium Files, a mystery game by Spike Chunsoft in which you try to discover the identity of the terrifying Cyclops serial killer, a murderer who takes their victims' left eyes. In it, you play as Kaname Date, a man with partial amnesia who uses sync technology, not like this, to dive into the subconscious of suspects to unravel what they know. But the dreams are esoteric and the case complex, so it seems like a simple crime ends up as a mystery with many branching paths. When I first picked up the Somnium Files, I almost immediately hated it, actually, because of its very cringy humor and visual gags which I thought were undercutting a genuinely interesting premise. But thankfully, the game dialed it back for more emotional moments, and I eventually got really hooked on the story. More than most Choices Matter games, I think the Somnium Files did a really good job of exploring different realities that come from even our smallest decisions, and demonstrated some of the hard choices that need to be made to get to the ultimate truth. Plus, the narrative got a lot of work out of a very small cast, and was fascinated to see these characters' actions across branching paths and realities, and how our knowledge and experience with them in one route could influence my decisions in another. At the end of the day, it's a very smart game, with fun action, characters, and detective work. And of course, a few reveals that blew me away. I definitely recommend this game, if not for the reasons previously stated, then because this game makes 4chan users mad because it mentions gay people. Woo! After the Somnium Files, I took a look at Muse Dash by Pero Games, a game I play for the plot, amongst other things. Muse Dash is a very simple rhythm game in which you alternate between 2 tracks, hitting enemies and dodging obstacles in time with the music. Besides that, there's not much else to this game, just vibing to music and grinding out new characters and companions. If anyone listening is new to rhythm games or wants to give it a try, I recommend Muse Dash as a starting point. It's cheap, easy, and new player friendly. Just make sure you wear headphones when talking to some of the characters. Continuing my way through cheap indies I picked up on Steam, next I gave Dicey Dungeons a try. As many of you may know, I'm not the biggest fan of roguelikes, because even the most fun to play ones rely so much on resetting progression and a just get good mindset that I detest. But these goddamn Steam devs keep finding new ways to make me like this genre. Thanks Distractionware and Terry! Like other roguelikes, Dicey Dungeons relies on you fighting your way through several floors of enemies to a randomized final boss, with limited healing and a full reset if you fail. However, what makes Dicey Dungeons unique is its mechanics. The game is a deck builder, where you collect cards with different effects, but in order to use your card abilities, you have to roll dice. So how effective you can be each turn is half about your arsenal of cards you built, and half about luck. Adding a luck requirement to the already high skill requirement genre of roguelikes sounds like a match made in hell. But Dicey Dungeons makes it work. High rolls are great, but some abilities work best with low numbers, or just evens, or just odds. When you build your deck just right, almost any roll can be just what you need. Granted, the game still isn't easy, but it strikes such a good balance between luck and strategy, with stellar music and great mechanics to boot, that I really and truly adore it. Great job, indie devs. You got me to say I like roguelikes again. Are you happy now? I'm not gonna lie, Fall Guys always looked fun to me, but I had a feeling it wasn't going to last more than a year as a paid online matchmaking game. And I was right! And then it went free to play. Take that, Mediatonic. So, patting myself on the back for saving $20, I finally gave Fall Guys a try this summer. For those who don't know, Fall Guys is a multiplayer 3D platformer where you compete against other players to be the best and fastest of the bunch. Unsurprisingly, I am pretty bad. The time pressure, performance aspect, and the sheer amount of people you need to wade your way through each level tend to work against me more often than help me. But even so, I had a really good time playing this game with my friends. I've enjoyed hanging out in VC and rooting my homies on when I inevitably fail, or playing custom lobbies with people on stream. I don't think Fall Guys is ever the type of game I would pay for or really play alone, but for what it is, a free-to-play party game, it works really well. In the various summer sales that took place across gaming platforms, I picked up Simogo's Sayonara Wild Hearts, a rhythm runner-style arcade game with great music and gorgeous use of colors. The game is all about exploring the stages of grief and recovery after a hard breakup, where we play as a protagonist fighting her way back from depression and into a place of self-love. Someone described this game as basically an interactive album, and I think that's honestly the most accurate way of looking at it. It's very short and simple, and in my opinion maybe a little steep at full price, but I like the concept of it a lot, and would actually maybe like to see a bigger artist try something like this with an album. Like, if this game was sent to Purity Ring or something, I would eat that shit up. As it is, it's a fun experimental game that maybe isn't exactly my cup of tea, but makes me hopeful for copycats in the future. Next, I took a look at Psychonauts, a game that had been on my radar for a while, but I hadn't had a chance to check out until it came to Xbox Game Pass. Psychonauts is a 3D action platformer by Double Fine. In it, you play as Rasputin, a young boy who attends a summer camp to hone his psychic abilities. At camp, he gains mystical powers like pyrokinesis and levitation, and learns how to enter the minds of others and enter their subconscious. However, when the other campers begin succumbing to a mysterious illness, it's up to Raz to save them. From a gameplay standpoint, there's a lot to love about Psychonauts, from its varied combat abilities, to fun boss fights, to its ever-changing level design. Yet, what stands out the most about Psychonauts is its killer original concept. Since the game is all about exploring the consciousness of others, we as players get to witness environments that reflect each individual person. For example, the easygoing Mia Video's inner mind is basically one big dance party, while the hardened veteran Oleander has a war zone in his head. Later, levels get even trippier, as Raz enters the mind of a few mentally disturbed individuals and views the world from their twisted and unique perspectives. It's truly a one-of-a-kind game and concept. Unfortunately, the game definitely shows its age with its floaty, unreliable platforming, which makes things really rough when half of the final level is a timed platforming section. But there's a lot of good concepts here that make it clear why people fell in love with the title in the first place. Psychonauts is truly a classic, and makes me hopeful for improvements in the sequel, whenever I get around to it. While taking breaks playing Psychonauts, I casually picked up Future Lab's PowerWash Simulator, a game I expected to play for a total of maybe 2 hours for the memes and then never touch again. And then I played it for 60 hours. Huh. As the name implies, PowerWash Simulator is a very simple game where you're given a dirty structure and a power washing hose and just basically told to go nuts. If I'm being honest, it's incredibly repetitive and tedious work, especially if you play the game solo like I did. But something about this game hit me at the right time and the right place, and I basically spent 2 weeks straight in early August just listening to podcasts and power washing. Unfortunately, I had to stop playing before I finished everything I wanted to due to glitches that kept resetting my progress, but I definitely got my fun out of this game. It's a very chill and relaxing title, and it's definitely worth a shot. Just make sure you play with a friend so you don't slowly lose your mind, or your progress. It was around this time that I moved, fortunately, from a very shitty apartment to a nice house in Oregon. Moving states was a grueling week-long process, and in between moving boxes and building desks, I desperately needed something to play to relax. Thankfully, my move coincided with the release of Disney Dreamlight Valley, a relaxing life sim where you explore a valley overtaken by darkness and help various Disney characters reclaim the lives and memories that were taken by it. It sounds intense when you put it like that, but really it's just a game about farming, cooking, dressing up, and hanging out with your favorite Disney characters. For the first 10 hours of playing this game, I loved it, and its chill atmosphere helped me unwind a lot. But after a while, the grind got to me. Every quest requires tirelessly gathering the same items over and over, and even making friends requires doing a whole friendship battle pass with each individual character. Normally, I like a casual grind like this, but Dreamlight Valley was the first time it got too much and I had to call it off. Maybe I'll come back someday, but not for a while. Not long after I settled into my new place, another popular cozy game launched, Slime Rancher 2. Slime Rancher 2 is an exploration and collection game that I had been anticipating ever since its announcement in 2021. As someone who absolutely adored the first game, I was over the moon about the idea of a sequel, and hopped on it immediately after launch. As expected, my first impression of the game was amazing, as I relived the joy of discovery in the first game as I came across various slimes, beautiful landscapes, and a rich and colorful world. As I ventured further and further, I found even greater beauty, and new friends too. However, as I played more, some of the wonders started to fade. The world is big and beautiful, but hard to navigate. The teleporters that were perfectly placed in the first game were hidden away in hard-to-find caches. And the big one, the game isn't finished yet. When I reached the end of the world, I found nothing but the howl of wind and the promise of more eventually. While I know a lot of people are fans of early access, I personally kind of hate it because it cuts what could have been a complete experience short, and instead of leaving me wanting more, just leaves me disappointed with how little we have. I know Monomi Park is still working on the game, but reaching that dead end really hammered home just how much I enjoyed the perfectly balanced, complete experience of the first game, and disliked the slow navigation and twists and turns of the second. Maybe one day I'll return to Slime Rancher 2, but until it's done, I think I have to be too. By this point in the year, it was around early October, and therefore a very special time of the year. My birthday! Haha! As part of my birthday, I received a number of games as gifts, the very first of which was one of the top games on my Steam wishlist, Stray. Stray is a very popular game for its unique premise. It's an exploration-adventure game in which you explore a cyberpunk city as a cat. Though its widespread appeal is immediately obvious, as a very dedicated cyberpunk fan and resident cat owner, this game was made for me. And to no one's surprise, I loved it. Stray was a beautiful little game, with gorgeous environments, endearing characters, and a short and simple story. I had a blast wandering this game's neon-lit streets and prodding the various robot inhabitants of the sealed city. Though the game's real magic came in its tiny details, as Blue 12 Studio added so many tiny stories and interactions that really breathe life into the world, and make you feel like a curious little cat. Truthfully, the controls weren't quite as tight as they could be, and I do wish the final areas were a little bigger, but I had a really good time with the game. Though honestly, could I really be surprised? It's fucking Annapurna. Annapurna, I love Annapurna. Another game I was generously gifted for my birthday was Hatsune Miku Project Diva Megamix, a rhythm game by and for weebs. For the most part, the game is exactly what you expect out of a rhythm game, a big song list where you mash buttons in time with the music. Except for two interesting exceptions. First is that you can dress up Hatsune Miku as pretty much whatever you want. So, being a resident dream demon, I of course dressed her up like a goth little demon girl. The second is that it's $40 at full price, which is definitely kind of a scam and not likely something I ever would have forked over for money if it hadn't been a gift. Sega definitely put a lot of work into it, and I can appreciate it for what it is. But also, at this point, just buy Osu. With Halloween banging down my door with an axe, the next game I ended up playing was The Quarry, a Choices Matter horror game about trying to survive the night at a summer camp. The game features a group of protagonists, all camp counselors who end up staying a night at the camp during hunting season, and paying the price. Since Until Dawn popularized the idea of hiring real actors for a Choices Matter movie-style game, there's been quite a few games that have attempted to capture the cheesy teen drama of the original, namely the Dark Pictures anthology, and all have kind of failed. However, what drew me to The Quarry and why I love it is because Supermassive Games actually managed to capture some of the magic of the original. The Quarry's characters are perfectly cliche and charming, equally easy to root for and root against. The mystery and drama elements aren't as strong as Until Dawn's, but it's a worthy spiritual successor to the original that I and so many others fell in love with. The bottom line is Until Dawn is better, but if you're like me and you wanted more, The Quarry is probably as close as we'll get to an Until Dawn 2. At this point, it was the end of November, and with a few months of streaming under my belt, I finally finished our first regular stream game, Yakuza 6. Yakuza 6 is a game I had been eagerly anticipating for a while, as it is the last game with Kiryu Kazuma as the protagonist, and the last game with a traditional beat-em-up combat style. With 6 other Yakuza games under my belt already, I had a lot of big expectations for this game, and for the most part, Ryuga Gotoku delivered. The game focused heavily on themes of family and father-child relationships, which was a refreshing change of pace from the same old real estate plot we tend to see over and over in Yakuza games. Unfortunately, we didn't see a lot of interactions between Kiryu and Haruka in this game, which would have really helped drive home that theme. But we were provided closure in the idea that Haruka would still have a family with her even after Kiryu's departure. Additionally, after years of fighting, we were finally allowed a clean end to Kiryu's story, which after seeing him fight and suffer for so long was a relief. I'm a bit disappointed that we didn't see more big names in the series to send him off, but overall I'm happy with the story's end, and eager to see how his successor steps up to the plate. The next game I played was a gift I received for stream, and that is Reed Graves' Trolley Problem Inc. As the title implies, the game was all about presenting moral dilemmas similar to the trolley problem and asking you to consider what you would do, why, and what your answer says about you as a person. Besides the good old-fashioned who would you kill questions, the game also got into some deep moral dilemmas, and some somewhat wacky side stories about AI, self-driving cars, and becoming the president. At some point, you even end up going on a secret mission and basically end up participating in a choose-your-own-adventure game more than answering moral questions. Because of that, it's a little bit of a weird experience, but I had fun playing it on stream with audience modes on. It's definitely a better party than solo game, but as long as you've got some friends, it's a real hoot. Just don't kill the dog, or you'll really regret it. The kids are fair game, though. Still exploring games I was gifted for stream, next came Disco Elysium. Disco Elysium is a detective CRPG in which you take on the role of Harry, a decorated cop with a history of alcohol abuse attempting to solve a highly political murder in the ocean town of Martinez. With a missing memory, waning morale, and tensions boiling in the bay, death is just one bad roll away. Before playing Disco Elysium, I had heard people praise its characters and writing for years, and expected to like it but not love it. But Studio Zom really knocked it out of the park with this game. It's a brilliantly written story with strong political and cultural connections to Eastern Europe, with tons of depth that I spent hours and hours exploring. Though its story only lasts around 7 in-game days, I put 40 hours into my first playthrough, before immediately jumping in for another. Though everything from its atmosphere to its music is ingenious, I think what's most phenomenal is this game's characters. Rich, abrasive, yet lovable nonetheless, it's impossible not to appreciate them in all their glory. And, most notable of all, the beloved Kim Kitsuragi. I am not exaggerating when I say Kim Kitsuragi is the best video game companion I have ever had the pleasure of working with, and he plays a phenomenal straight man off of Harry's wild antics. I've always loved buddy cop storylines, but Harry and Kim's is simply one of the best out there, and Disco Elysium is one of the best detective games on the market. It is truly a masterpiece, and I wish everyone out there a hearty go play it. Around this time, I had my arm twisted by some friends to give a very infamous multiplayer game a try, and that is Fortnite. I had played some Fortnite in its first season, but I could never really get behind the building element of it. Plus, I was too poor at the time to buy a skin, so I felt like a loser getting clowned on by flashy-looking elementary schoolers as a senior in high school. But with the introduction of no build mode and a ton of friends who started playing the game, I had little choice but to give it a try. And honestly, it kinda slaps. Epic Games Studio are masters of limited time events, and constantly switch things up to keep things fresh and fun. Plus, they collab with pretty much every big name in media these days, so it's only a matter of time before they hit some of my favorite titles. Plus, I have money now, so I can actually buy skins and emotes and hang with the cool kids. It's definitely predatory how much Fortnite capitalizes on FOMO, not to mention their actual scummy practices of hard marketing to kids and letting them save their parents' card information to blow thousands on virtual cosmetics. But I won't lie, it's fun. And I have definitely become a little bit addicted. Oops. Moving into December and the end of the year, I was gifted Massive Monsters Cult of the Lamb, a roguelike/simulation game about building a cult and fighting through dungeons of non-believers. Despite a seemingly dark premise, the game is softened by its extremely cute visuals and animal characters. Not to mention, thanks to its Twitch integration, I was able to make all of my friends into characters in the cult, which they got to design and root for live while I played. Though roguelikes aren't always my cup of tea, as I previously said, the sense of community I got playing this game with real people as my cult members really enhanced my enjoyment of the game. Plus, having people there to cheer me on through boss fights, plagues, and other obstacles made each loss sting a bit less than it would have alone. It was a great community game, and easily my favorite on-stream experience of the year. If you at all can, I highly recommend playing it with your friends. I mean, who hasn't wanted to start a cult with their 10 closest friends? I mean, come on. With the final days of December creeping up, I had just enough time to squeeze in one final game that I had been working on since early fall, Dragon Age Origins. For those out of the know, the Dragon Age games are RPGs critically acclaimed for both their stellar combat and strong writing. As someone who started with Inquisition and worked my way backwards through the DA titles, I entered Origins knowing it would feel a bit old and clunky compared to the polished, critically acclaimed newer games I was used to. But my god, did the old one show its age. Compared to later titles, Dragon Age Origins is unbearably slow, with grindy, repetitive fights, twisting dungeons, and very basic world building. The most interesting part of the Dragon Age series, the dialogue and characters, were pushed to the background in favor of endless combat encounters. Every single mission involved about 2 hours of fighting, 5 minutes of interesting dialogue with a meaningful choice at the end, and then a repeat of the above. It wasn't all bad, of course, and I can see the threads of interest that gave people faith in BioWare and spawned the rest of the series. But compared to the newest titles, Origins is so far behind in terms of pacing and narrative that it was hard to go back to. Still, I'm happy I played it, as to be a true and complete Dragon Age fan. Plus, it's hard to think of a better end to the year than right where I started, a classic early 2000s AAA RPG. And that's everything. Thanks so much for sticking around and listening to me rant, as usual. If you want to hear me rant more about games live, I do that now, twitch.tv/MysticFyres. Otherwise, you can stick around on this channel for more game stuff, game talks, all the stuff that I do. I'll see you next year for more reviews. In the meantime, take care. This is Fire, signing out. Bye.